Hello, everyone, and welcome to this webinar to introduce Mount Hope Mining, an emerging copper-gold explorer with focus on the highly prospective Mount Hope project in the Cobar Basin of New South Wales. Fergus Kiley, one of the directors of Mount Hope Mining, will walk you through the company's plans and vision ahead of its proposed IPO. The Cobar Basin has seen some significant success not only recently but historically, with high-grade discoveries and significant production. If you'd like to ask questions, please feel free during the presentation. You can click on the Q&A button that is at the bottom of the screen and type your question. We'll address them at the end of the presentation. And just a quick reminder, this webinar is intended for general information purposes only. By registering and attending, you confirm that you qualify as a sophisticated or professional investor as defined by the Corporations Act. Fergus, I'll hand it over to you.
Beautiful. Thank you very much, Gigi. Thank you very much, everyone, for attending the call. I recognise that everyone has pretty busy schedules, so I endeavour to leave you with something valuable at the end of this call because you've taken the time to hear our story. So as Gigi said, I'm going to take you through the Mount Hope Mining presentation. This is a new copper gold exploration vehicle that we've been working on and putting together over the recent months. And I'll step through the presentation now. This is some important information, disclaimers. The presentation has been made available. I'll allow you to digest that in your own time. This is an indicative corporate snapshot for the company, recognising that the company is a public unlisted limited company at the moment. This is the indicative corporate snapshot and pro forma that we're looking at. The board of directors is a solid board led by Ben Phillips, non-executive chair. He's non-executive chair or executive chair of Norfolk Minerals and also sits on the board of Many Peaks. Myself, I'll be leading as managing director. Todd Williams is the current managing director of Unico Silver. Unico is the project vendor of the Mount Hope project. Will also be joining the board to represent their holding. And the management team is rounded out by Paul Kiley. Paul Kiley is actually my old man. He's far better looking than I am, but he's got a long and decorated career in mining. Recently, he served as CFO through Catalyst's transition through the Henty and Plutonic transactions. He was CFO and co-sec for Hillgrove, the copper producer in South Australia, and was Director of Corporate Development APAC for Newmont for many years. So if we now, before we take on the rest of the presentation, I just want to set the scene for Cobar for those on the call. Some of you may or may not be familiar with the jurisdiction, and if you are, I apologise if I'm retreading old ground here. But I've decided to pull out the exploration return profile for the discovery phase for various Cobar explorers. Now, recently we've had Australian gold and copper with a significant discovery, the Achilles discovery, which they made back in May, which saw significant total shareholder returns if you take the peak to trough, the trough to peak return profile. And the x-axis of the graph is across days. But what's important to understand is that not only was this discovery significant, it was not standalone. The Cobar Basin has been a long and decorated mining and exploration field, and these style exploration returns are seen throughout the basin across its life. We've also pulled out the recent discoveries of Mallee Bull and Southern Nights from Peel Mining, which shows similar return profiles over that period of time. It's really important to set the scene, I feel, because we think we've got something really special on our hands here, and I hope by the end of the call, you guys agree that we do have something special as well. So if we now zoom out and have a look at the Cobar Basin as a whole, and why we're quite excited about being in this area, it's a proven mining and exploration jurisdiction. Mining commenced here in some form in the late 1800s, 1870s to be prescript. And in fact, what I've done here is I've broken the Cobar Basin up into the northern, central, and southern parts of the basin. Now, this isn't my own sort of work. People have broken the basin up into these segments before, but I think it's important to understand the history and development of the basin over its period of time. I've pulled out some of the historic production statistics and current reserves and resources, along with operating mines or mines in care and maintenance. Just move the logo down here. But what you can see, the general trend from the north into the central, into the southern part of the basin, is that you have a decreasing historic production, decreasing reserves, and a reduction in operating mines or mines in care and maintenance. That principally is because when the historic CSA and Great Cobar mines were discovered, a lot of the exploration discovery activity migrated from the entire basin up to the north. As the age-old saying in mining goes, the best place to find ounces or tons is in the shadow of a head frame. And when you had prolific discoveries such as the CSA mine in the north, it's really centered a lot of the activity up into that region. So with that in mind, that doesn't mean that the basin bounding faults that control structure don't progress into the central, from the north into the central, into the southern part. And certainly the geological characteristics that control mineralization in this part of the world extend from the north into the central and down into the southern part. You can see on this map, I've put our tenements in the south here, in the black. Now, we believe that the southern part of the Cobar Basin is absolutely ripe for future exploration success. You've seen that recently with this discovery of Achilles by the AGC team, which has been a incredible discovery story. Peel Mining have Southern Nights, which is also in the Mount Hope subtrough, which is the geological formation that our tenements form in. And importantly, we are on these basin bounding faults. We have the Sugarloaf Fault over to the west and the Scots Craig Fault over to the east. And being nearby these faults is really important because it's the primary driver and fluid migration pathway for these metals in fluids. You'll also note that in the southern part of the basin, there are currently no operating mines, and the reserves and resources are very small. So this is sort of the new frontier and search space that we feel that is ready and primed for attack. If we take this planar view of the map here, recognizing that Cobar's north to south about 220 odd Ks, and we flip it on its side and look at it at cross section and review the basin, what do we find? Well, this is sort of what we find. On the left-hand side of the screen, you've got the northern part of the basin with the CSA mine, Endeavour Mines, Great Cobar Mines, for example. I should highlight here that the CSA mine is the second deepest underground mine currently in activity in all of Australia. The mine was first found in the late 1870s and has gone through semi-continuous production over its years. It was recently transacted between Glencore and MAC last year for US $1.1 billion. So if we just back up and think about that for a second, CSA was found in the 1870s. It's been in semi-continuous production over that period of time, which is greater than 150 years, and it's still transacted for a ticket price of US $1.1 billion after 150 years of resource depletion. What does that tell you about the Cobar? It tells you that these assets are long life, incredibly valuable, and when you get onto one of these systems, they can go to more or less the center of the earth. That's really important also to remember, because you'll recall the northern part of the basin has seen the majority of exploration and mining activity, with mines extending over 2 kilometers of depth. We then step into the central part of the basin, where you've got mining which has occurred since, more or less the 60s and 70s. Some of the deeper operations in that area are Namaji and Hira. You also have the recent discovery of the Federation mine, which has just been put into production by Aurelia. And then, of course, you start looking in the southern part of the basin. In the southern part of the basin, the deepest historic mining front that's ever occurred is, in fact, the historic Mount Hope copper mine, which is mined to a total depth of 113 meters. So this is why we're pretty excited about our tenure and this opportunity. Not only if you get onto one of these systems, are they incredibly valuable, high-grade polymetallic style deposits, but the vertical profile, the vertical search space is absolutely immense. And that is part of the opportunity that we feel we've got on our ground. So if we now step into the historic Mount Hope mine itself, this is integral to our value proposition and why we're so excited about our tenure. Mount Hope, as I said, was discovered in 1878 and worked until 1919. So you'll recall that's about the same time the CSA mine was found. It has historical production of over 7,000 copper tonnes of metal, or 7,500 tonnes of ore at 10.5% copper. That's very small in today's numbers, but 10.5% copper is an incredibly high tenor level in the sulfide. And just by virtue of having this mine adjacent to our tenure and us having the along strike extension of this geology, we've already de-risked our portfolio by demonstrating the fertility of our ground. You know, by having a historic mine that went 10.5% copper just on the edge of our tenure, we believe we've got the strike extent and therefore the search space undercover of the extension of this mine. Now that's important as well, because if you go look at some of CSA results, MAP's results from the CSA mine, only just back in June and July, they've been drilling 20-meter intercepts at 10% copper plus co-products. So that's why this particular historic mine we feel is really important to our value proposition. And we're not going to be inventing anything new here. We also have 4 other historic mines on or nearby our tenure where the search space along strike and undercover is wide open to us. And now I'll step you through the project itself, its location, and our targeting matrix. So if we have a look at the project, it's located in the southern part of the Cobar Basin. It's 148 k's south of Cobar itself. We have a 175 square kilometre land package. We've got a major New South Wales artery highway running through the centre of our tenements. That's a bitumen highway, the Kidman Way. So we have year-round access. We've got access to power, water, 5G signal. Our project is on the doorstep of the Mount Hope Township, which only exists because of the historic Mount Hope mine. And you can see in the background of this slide here, this is the 23-man exploration camp that's already set up and active that we use to conduct our exploration activities. So as far as exploration goes, we're not in some far-flung country or out in some greenfields province. We are executing exploration more or less for beginners here in a well-endowed, a high infrastructure availability region of the Cobar Basin. And you can see a couple of the other projects that are nearby to us. We're 28 k's southeast of the Southern Nights style projects, and we are northwest of Achilles' recent discovery, 40 k's. And this is the geological model that we're taking of these style deposits that we're taking and exploring for. Within our tenure, we've got 4 of these lookalike targets, that we're looking for with a gold target. And I'll walk you through the targeting matrix for these now, for these targets that we have. So one of the beautiful things about working in a brownfields mining camp is that we have significant access to data, and we have a targeting model that is built up over decades and decades and decades of understanding from exploration and mining of these style projects. We're not really inventing something new here. We're not reinventing the wheel. We're just taking an understanding of how these deposit types form and applying that exploration rationale into new search spaces on our ground that is undercover and hasn't yet been explored with modern exploration techniques. The basic framework for finding these Cobar-style high-grade polymetallic VMS systems are you want a confluence of indicators or anomalies. You need the correct structural setting. You need that structural setting in the correct geology. You need a proximity to a heat source. That structural setting and heat source allows the mineralized fluids to move through the rock and migrate to a trap zone. You then, once you have that confluence of settings, you then start to get down to the prospect scale, and you use tools such as geochemical analysis, surface-based geochemical analysis, and airborne and ground geophysics to look for targets. And so within our tenure, leveraging the significant amount of historic data that we've got, plus the project vendor Unico's recent work, we've started to define these target areas in our project. So if we start with the gravity data that we have access to, we've started to map out the major structures. And we know from other projects within the basin that these deposits cluster on north-northeast and west-northwest structural lineament intersections. You can see that from the historic Herod discovery, which was made by AMI. We then take that structural mapping and we overlay over the magnetics. So within the middle of our tenure, and this is our tenure on the left and the right here, we have these two pimple-like features. And these features have been interpreted to be circular magnetic anomalies or interpreted as deep-seated intrusions. These would be our proximity to heat source and mineralized fluids, and that structure provides a pathway for those fluids to migrate up to the trap zone. Interestingly, I've also pulled a similar feature from Peel Mining's Wagga Tank and Southern Nights project, which you'll recall was only 28 k's to the northwest of our tenure. And they too have their mineralisation, which is found on the western side of this dome structure. So we think we've got similar structural setting. We think we've got a proximity to heat source that could drive these mineralised fluids. We note that the historic mines in our tenure are on either the west-northwest or northeast structural intersections. We then look at overlaying modern exploration techniques like airborne EM. Now, in 2021, the project vendor, Unico Silver, which at the time was called E2 Metals, completed an airborne EM survey over this entire, over this central part of this tenement package. Interestingly, no one had done this before in this area, so the search space was wide open. That survey that they completed, they identified 10 priority 1 targets, which are denoted by the red stars in the map on the right-hand side, and then a series of priority 2 and priority 3 targets. Another interesting point that I'll draw your eyes to on this map is the map highlights some effectively grey rocks and some tan-coloured rocks in the middle. You'll note that the grey rocks are more or less outcropping geology, so they are hill structures or things that stick out of the ground within our tenure. And we currently have the Mount Hope mine in the north, the Mount Solitary mine in the east, the Mount Solar mine in the east, and the Great Central and Comet mines in the west, all occurring on outcropping geology and proximal to priority 1 and priority 2 EM anomalies, which sit undercover from and along strike from these various mines. Now, if we then take this EM data and overlay it with the structural setting, the mapping that we did previously, we then start to build up a holistic picture of what's occurring in these undercover regions. And this is why we're starting to get really excited about this portfolio of assets. We've taken the open file geochemical data that's available for our tenure. We've pulled out the lead in soil anomalism. Lead in soils has been proven time and time again as a very effective geochemical exploration tool within the broader Cobar Basin itself. So I've highlighted the lead in soil geochemical anomalisms, and you can see which are these red features here. And these are now starting to develop our primary targets. We have lead in soil geochemical anomalism, Mount Hope East, Black Hill, Main Road East, and in this little Mount Solitary region. We also have the correct structural settings and proximity to airborne EM targets. Now, if we think about this, for example, and we start to overlay these coincident anomalies together, this matrix on the left-hand side here outlines the data that we have and the data that may be required to deliver a drill-ready target. All of these areas have the correct structural architecture. They all have some level of geochemical or geochemical targeting, as denoted by the lead in soil isotope, lead in soil anomalism, apologies. We have EM anomalies that are proximal to them. What we don't have is IP over these targets. We have a small postage stamp of IP that was done in the Little Mount Solitary region, but that needs to be expanded. And IP, it's that confluence of lead in soil geochemical anomalism, IP, that really drives the prospect scale drill targeting. But most importantly, none of these targets have ever been drilled before. And that really is the search space, undercover, a long strike from existing historic mines with a confluence of these indicators. And that's our target and goal moving forward, is to test, bring these targets up to drill ready and test them. The next point I'll draw your attention to is this sort of north-south gold trend on the eastern side of our tenure. This is a less advanced target, and we call this the Mount Solitary to Mount Solar gold trend. Now, in the northern part of the Cobar Basin, there is a gold field that is run by Aurelia Metals. And if you look at a long section of that Peak to Perseverance gold field in the north, and then you transpose our Mount Solitary to Mount Solar region in the south, you can see a similar distance, proximal to structural control. And where we've got outcropping geology, there has been gold showings or historic workings. Now, I note that this target is more immature than our other base metals targets. We would have to go out here and do some first pass soils over the trend to better define targets. But this is something, it's just another lever of value proposition that we can pull on and is a little bit unique to our tenement package and portfolio, is having this sort of gold dominated target. So I'll just step you through the last slide in our presentation here. And I think it's really important to highlight some of the recent corporate activity that's been happening in the Cobar Basin. The Cobar, for the last 20 years or so, has been a somewhat dour place to invest. And we believe that the winds on that have changed. Principally, if you think about any great mining jurisdiction, mining belts around the world, what you'll have is 1, 2, 3 major deposits that are controlled by major miners. And then you'll have a long tail of defined resources into exploration targets. Now, those majors in the belt are always trying to refill their production pipeline as they continue to cannibalize the best assets in the belt. Well, if we look at Cobar and think about what's happened for the last 20 years in this belt of rocks, the CSA mine and the Endeavour mine, the two largest mines in the region, have been owned by Glencore and been owned by Toho Zinc, or Toho Zinc subsidiary CBA Resources. Now, those two global mining companies have not been traditional acquirers of projects within this entire basin, because these style of projects don't necessarily move the needle for major international mining companies. So that means exploration success within the basin has not had that sort of overarching corporate tension dynamic, which would have usually acquired many of these excellent discoveries that have occurred over the last decade or so. We believe that that's changed with the acquisition of CSA by Metals Acquisition Corp last year, and of course Polymetals looking at restarting the Endeavour mine in the first half of next year. You've now got the two major mines in the belt owned by acquisitive corporate entities who have come out publicly and said that they are looking to actively increase their exposure to the basin. And with that in mind, we feel that exploration in the southern part of the basin could yield these excellent style discoveries that have been found in the north and central as the new search space. And we will have that overarching corporate tension of the big fish in the small pond looking to consolidate the area. Just as a testament to that, I've pulled out only the last 4 months worth of corporate activity, and this is by no means an exhaustive list of what's been occurring in the basin. But go back to May 24, you've seen the Achilles discovery by AGC. You've seen also in the same month, MAC invested 5 million in polymetals as a part of their restart package for the Endeavour mine. MAC, as I alluded to earlier on the call, having 22-metre intercepts at 9.8% copper plus co-products. Peel Mining just the other day released its highest drill results to date at the Wagga Tank deposit. Only 2 weeks ago, you had Federation. The Federation mine was officially opened by the New South Wales government. And of course, only just last week, Polymetals secured the Endeavour mine restart financing package. And one last point that I'll leave you with in understanding the Cobar Basin, Aurelia Metals made the Federation discovery in 2019. Adam McKinnon and the team there did an exceptional job at a greenfields discovery in 2019. That mine has just been put into production with the first ore stope dropping this quarter. That means that's gone from a greenfield discovery to a producing mine in 5 years' time. Now, that is almost unheard of globally, let alone in Australia. But what that really demonstrates is the true pedigree of this environment of Cobar as a mining jurisdiction. People here know and understand mining. It's in their blood. It's been a part of the fabric of the society here since the 1870s. And this is the perfect place to go exploring in a jurisdiction where people want your corporate activity. So I'll just leave you with that last thought. As we step through the end of the presentation, hopefully you've had an opportunity to digest the material and you're as excited about the value proposition that we think Mount Hope Mining presents as we are. We've got 5 key targets. The belt's right for consolidation, and we're looking and set up for exploration success. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Fergus. I've got a couple of questions on the back of the prezzo. We'll kick off with Unico is selling the Mount Hope project. Why are they selling it if it has so much promise?
Yeah, that's a great question, actually, Gigi. So the Unico have decided to sell the project because they shifted focus corporately a few years back to become a South American-focused silver exploration and development company. They most recently announced a transaction for the Wah Kim project acquisition, which has really set them on the way as a project developer. So their corporate structure is not one that lends itself to exploring in New South Wales and the Cobar Basin. They also recognise that having equity exposure to a well-financed exploration company that can actively progress these assets forward is probably the best way for them to realise value for this portfolio of assets. And so they were a keen project vendor for us, and we can leverage their project history and exposure and really take these assets forward.
Excellent. And what's the project timeframe for commencing work at Mount Hope?
Another really good question. We've already been working in the background on this project. To that end, I've already gone out and secured the land access agreements with the key pastoralists in this region. So we have land access agreements in place right now to go out and commence work. We'll be going out and completing confirmatory soil geochemical programs over those open file anomalies that we've pulled out. We will then be completing surface-based geophysics, so ground EM and IP over those regions, looking to get this target portfolio ready to be drilled within the next 6 months. So that's the sort of first 6 months and the general trajectory that we're working towards. And because we have those land access agreements in place, work can begin imminently, of which we are going to be getting out and commencing in October.
This one might be a bit curly. So recently we've seen some negative press about project permitting in New South Wales. Does the Mount Hope project have any native title or access issues that need to be addressed?
Actually, another very good question and somewhat topical. So one of the key advantages of this project portfolio is that native title has been more or less extinguished over the entire 175 square kilometre tenure package. I said just before in the previous response that I've already gone out and secured land access agreements with the key pastoralists where the tenements interact with. So from a stakeholder perspective, they are the only stakeholders for the ground, other than, of course, the New South Wales government. So there are no land access issues associated with this tenement package, nor our assets. And that's hence why we're so readily able to go out and commence work on this, imminently.
This sort of actually links on quite nicely, but what is the local stakeholder or state government support like for project development in the region at the moment?
Another good question here, Gigi. So local. I'll start with state and federal government support. I mentioned in the call that Aurelia Metals have taken a greenfields discovery through to developing a mine in under 5 years' time. That's an exceptional time frame in any jurisdiction globally, let alone in Australia. So that shows you that the Cobar Basin has strong support for developing mining projects. I also note that from that announcement from AMI, the New South Wales Minister for Mines was actually at the opening ceremony, cutting the ribbon with the management team, more or less. So there's strong state support for project developments in this region. The New South Wales government has come out and said that. At the local level, as I mentioned, we've already been boots on the ground here, engaging with the local stakeholders. So this is principally, we're talking about the residents of the community of the Mount Hope Township and local stakeholders, and updating them of the exploration activities that we're going to be conducting in the next 3, 6, 12-month period. And they're very keen to see activity occurring on the project. They know and understand what mining is, that it's been a bedrock of the fabric of the society in the basin, and they also understand the positive effects that can come from economic development from these style of projects. So from a local stakeholder perspective, they're really keen to see us get out and do work. And I guess that's probably been evidenced by securing the land access agreements with the pastoralists already before taking this project any further. We don't have to worry about that being a stumbling block for us moving forward.
Sorry, Fergus. What is your previous experience leading into this role?
So I'm a geologist by background, Gigi. I have had I've been sort of quite fortuitous to have a varied career as a geologist, and I'll admit it's been through no sort of great design of my own. I've been very much a beneficiary of the right place, right time. Prior to this role, I've been working in project development roles for other ASX-listed entities, including Nico Resources and the like. And I also spent about 4 years working in mining private equity. I was a technical team member and senior geologist for the Wyloo Metals at the time, it's now just called Wyloo Group. So I guess I've got a bit of a history in project development and capital markets focus and exposure. And prior to those 2 stints, which is more or less the last 16 or so years of my life, I worked various exploration, project development, mining and construction roles across Australia and abroad, internationally, throughout the Tethyan Belt. The contact details are in the presentation. we're pretty excited about the project. Reach out if you've got any questions.